What if, at this very moment while you were breathing, the sun disappeared without warning? Not a blackout, not an eclipse, but a total disappearance, as if the universe had turned off its energy source. In 8 minutes, the last ray of light reaching Earth would be extinguished, plunging the planet into a darkness so dense that you would feel the weight of emptiness in your chest. Entire cities would come to a standstill. Children would cry without understanding. Adults would scream in despair. Get ready, because the scenario I'm about to reveal isn't just frightening, it's a mirror of what we are when all certainties fade away. Imagine the chaos. The heat that sustains life on Earth would plummet by 5 degrees Celsius an hour. In 24 hours, thermometers would read -15 degrees. In a week, -60 degrees. Rivers would turn into ice sculptures. Plants would die en masse. Animals would go into a frenzy, feeling death coming. And you, without energy, without communication, without knowing if the one you love is still breathing, would have only one question. How can we maintain hope when even the laws of nature seem to be abandoning us? This is not an exercise in fiction. It's a cosmic warning. While science explains the physical collapse, the question echoing in the shadows is deeper. What sustains our humanity when the world collapses? Is it their possessions, their status, or the invisible force that holds us together even in chaos? Visualize the despair on the streets. Looted supermarkets, parents exchanging jewelry for a blanket, mothers singing songs of hope in damp basements. In the midst of the panic, stories would emerge. They're a community leader organizing groups to share resources, a scientist trying to rekindle the flame of reason, a child asking, "Mommy, will the sun come back?" What would you do? Run to find your loved ones? Question everything you've learned? Or would you discover in the darkness that the only real light comes from human connection? Here's the uncomfortable truth. Physical darkness reveals the essence of the soul. While the Earth wanders aimlessly through the cosmos, slowly freezing, billions would realize that they have spent their lives neglecting what really matters, the interdependence that keeps us alive. Have you ever stopped to think about that? As you watch this video, comfortable in your home, the sun is still shining. But what if this is your last chance to rethink what sustains your existence? What follows is not just a simulation, it's a final wake-up call. As you watch, the imaginary Earth's clock is running out, and every second of darkness will reveal secrets that challenge even the bravest. Press play and dive into this journey, but don't go alone. Leave your like now to mark your place in the resistance. Subscribe to the channel and activate the little bell as a beacon against the darkness. Without it, you may never find out how humanity and you would react to the end of light. This could be our last chance to stand together. Before the last vestige of hope is extinguished, the clock is ticking. Click here. Watch. Survive. Imagine the sun not just as a star in the sky, but as the invisible heart that keeps the planet beating. Each beat of this cosmic heart sends out, in 8 minutes and 20 seconds, a breath of light and heat that travels 150 million kilometers until it reaches us. It is this energy that wakes up the seeds under the earth, that makes the oceans breathe through the tides, that keeps your body at 36 degrees Celsius, even in winter. But here's the secret that most people don't know. The sun doesn't illuminate, it creates. Without it, photosynthesis would stop in 8 minutes. Within an hour, plants would stop producing oxygen. In one day, the average temperature would drop to -18 degrees Celsius. And you, who at this very moment are reading these words, would begin to tremble not out of fear, but because your body literally wasn't made to exist without this star. Now think, what keeps you alive is not your strength, your intelligence, or your money. It's a cosmic balance so precise that if the Earth were 5% closer to the sun, we'd be toast. 5% further away, and we'd be ice statues. The sun is the conductor of the Earth's symphony. Its gravity keeps the planets in orbit, like a father holding the hand of a restless child. Its energy feeds the winds, the rains, even the carbon in your cells. Without it, there would be no wind to turn wind turbines, no liquid water for hydroelectric plants, no oil, which is in essence solar energy stored for millions of years in fossils. In other words, all human technology is a fragile extension of the sun's power. And if it were to disappear, our supposed modernity would crumble like a sandcastle at high tide. And here comes the question that will take your breath away. Without the sun, how long do you think humanity would survive? The answer is stark: less than a month. After 72 hours, the average temperature would reach -40 degrees Celsius. Survivors would flock to nuclear bunkers or active volcanoes, where the geothermal heat would perhaps offer a few extra weeks of life. But even then, without light to grow food, without heat to purify water, without energy for machines, we would be like cockroaches in a giant fridge, slowly agonizing in the dark until our last breath. What about you? If the sun disappeared now, what would sustain your hope, your scientific knowledge, which explains the end but offers no consolation? Your material resources, which would turn to ice and dust, or your faith? Comment now with one of these words. I would survive if you believe that your faith would withstand the void. I would not survive if you feel that despair would win. Each answer is a ray of light in this hypothetical darkness. And I want to know, imagine that as you read these words, the sun disintegrates this very second. You wouldn't notice a thing for 8 minutes and 20 seconds. That's how long it takes light to travel to Earth, the same time that separates normality from the apocalypse. In those final 500 seconds of light, children would continue to play in parks. Couples would kiss under the blue sky, and you might finish reading this paragraph. Life would go on as if nothing had happened. But in space, a deadly silence would spread. Satellites had detected the sun's gravitational absence and would send out chaotic alerts, ignored by humans who still laugh at memes on social media. Then, the sky goes out. Not a gradual darkening, but a dry cut. In 10 seconds, the outside temperature would plummet by 5 degrees Celsius. In an hour, 15 degrees less. His body, accustomed to a comfortable 26 degrees, would begin to shiver uncontrollably. Your cell phone, which was at 60% battery, would turn off abruptly, not because of a lack of power, but because the liquid inside would freeze, cracking the screen. Cars would crash at intersections because the traffic lights, even with backup power, would be covered in ice within 30 minutes. And what about hospitals? ICUs would switch off mechanical ventilators, condemning patients in 2 minutes. But the real horror would be in people's eyes. Absolute darkness, unlike any night, would blot out even the shadow of the moon. Their pupils would dilate to the maximum, useless. You would try to light a flashlight, but the batteries would fail at temperatures below -20 degrees. Your brain, deprived of visual references, would begin to hallucinate. Shadows, whispers, phantom lights. Science calls this the Ganzfeld effect, but in practice, it would be the beginning of collective madness. But what if the lightning stopped? If the radio stations went silent? If the last sign of life was the whimper of a dog lost in the street? Communications would die in 3 cruel stages. First 5 minutes, mobile networks would collapse due to widespread panic. 20 minutes later, communication satellites would freeze in orbit, killing the internet. An hour and a half later, even amateur radios, the last hope, would go silent. The air, ionized by the extreme cold, would block radio waves. And you, totally isolated, would face the most primitive of fears: absolute loneliness. No news, no messages, no voice from the one you love. All that would remain is the final choice. Run out into the street in search of other survivors, or lock yourself in your house and wait for death to come. In the midst of the chaos, faith would become the only currency of value. Churches would fill up in 15 minutes, even with atheists. Parents would teach the Lord's Prayer to frightened children. And in basements, groups would sing hymns in trembling choirs, not out of devotion but to feel alive. Would you join them? Or would you be one of those who steal candles from altars, swearing out loud that God has abandoned us? What would you do if the world went dark without warning? Would you run to hug your loved ones, even if you didn't know where they were? Pray for the first time in years, even though you're not sure anyone will hear? Or would you give up, lying down on the cold ground to accept the end? Comment now with one of these words: hope, if you believe that your faith would shine brighter in the darkness. Fear, if you admit that despair would speak louder. Each comment is a silent testimony to what we carry inside, and I want to read yours. After 72 hours of darkness, the planet would enter a state of cosmic mourning. The temperature, which had already plummeted to -40 degrees Celsius, would begin a free fall towards the impossible. Within a week, the thermometers would mark -80 degrees, cold enough to freeze the air in your lungs in 3 deep breaths. Rivers like the Amazon, which once roared to life, would turn into grim ice roads, so solid that heavy trucks could cross them. The oceans, those masses of mystery and movement, would begin to petrify. First a thin layer of ice in 2 days, then 10 meters thick in 3 weeks. Fish, whales, even creatures from the abyssal depths would be trapped like fossils in an ice museum, their bodies preserved in poses of eternal agony. But the real horror would be in the invisible details. The air would become poison. With photosynthesis interrupted, oxygen levels would drop by 5% every day. Within a month, breathing would be like pulling frozen water into your lungs. Tropical forests, once the lungs of the planet, would turn into graveyards of broken trees, their trunks snapping like gunshots in the icy silence. And the animals. Birds would fall from the sky, frozen in mid-flight. Wolves would howl for the last time before their throats became blocks of ice. Even insects, creatures that have survived 5 mass extinctions, would succumb, proving that not even evolutionary resilience beats the end of light. Here's the cruelest detail. Cold wouldn't kill first. Hunger would. Supermarkets would already be empty, but even if you found a forgotten can, its contents would be frozen and inedible. Milk, stone, fruit, sharp crystals, water, a solid block that would require hours of body heat to melt. Heat you can't afford to waste. Families would gather around bonfires of books, furniture, and even clothes, burning memories for 10 minutes of warmth. But what about when the sun refuses to rise? When the moon turns into a dead sphere reflecting nothing? Faith would be tested not by philosophers or atheists, but by the implacable law of physics. Churches packed on the first day would be empty on the 7th, not for lack of hope, but because the faithful would be dead, their bodies lined up in pews, frozen in prayer poses. The planet, once vibrant with life, would become a frozen wasteland, not in millennia, but in weeks. Cities like Dubai, New York, and Tokyo would be sarcophagi of steel and glass. The ice would crack skyscrapers, communication towers would fall like dominoes, and the wind would howl death songs through deserted streets. And in the midst of this silence, a truth would emerge. Everything we build depends on a star we barely look at. But there is an even deeper question. What would happen to the human soul? Without the sun, without seasons, without the cycle of life and death, the concept of time would dissolve. You wouldn't know whether it's Monday or Sunday, whether it's morning or evening. Your mind, deprived of routines, would begin to crumble. Parents would forget their children's names, lovers, each other's faces. But what if the days don't end? What if the darkness is infinite? There would only be one choice, to burn with faith or freeze in despair. And what about you? Would you be the type to fight to the end, leaving your mark in search of survival and hope? Or the type who accepts inevitable fate, hoping that the end will come without suffering? Comment with one of these words. Resilience. If you believe that hope can endure even in the most extreme conditions. Courage. If you believe that even in the deepest silence, inner strength can guide you to the last moment. Every comment is an act of resistance, and I need to know what yours is. Imagine a world where the air burns like acid, where every breath is an icy stab in the lungs, and where the silence is so heavy that you can hear your own blood freezing in your veins. After 3 weeks without the sun, the Earth would no longer be a planet. It would be a tomb of ice. Cities like São Paulo, Paris, and Tokyo, which once housed millions of souls, are now concrete necropolises. Buildings collapse under the weight of 10 meters of snow. Cars are just piles of twisted metal under layers of black ice. And the survivors? Less than 1% of the global population. These few would agonize in underground bunkers, abandoned mines, or secret military bases where the geothermal heat offers a miserable respite. But even this heat comes at a price. The air is running out. In makeshift shelters, humanity would show its rawest face. Parents would exchange their children for cans of frozen food. Yes, you read that right. Armed gangs would control the last diesel generators, selling 15 minutes of electricity for jewelry or empty promises. Pregnant women would be abandoned in freezing corridors, as a crying baby could attract looters. And in the midst of the darkness, new laws would be born. He who has fire rules. Could you sleep knowing that the colleague next to you could kill you for a blanket? But there are stories that defy chaos. In a mine in South Africa, 200 people of different beliefs and backgrounds would unite around written words, memorizing inspiring passages and reciting them in chorus, using the heat of their own breath to prevent the pages from freezing. In Tokyo, an engineer would improvise a power plant using cell phone batteries recovered from bodies, keeping a single light bulb burning as a symbol of hope. In Manaus, an indigenous tribe would use ancestral knowledge to weave blankets from Amazonian leaves, proving that the wisdom passed down from generation to generation can endure where technology fails. The worst thing isn't the cold or hunger. It's the question that no one dares to answer. Are these the last weeks of civilization as we know it? In government bunkers, world leaders would discuss survival plans that include human sacrifices to reduce oxygen consumption. Scientists would try to create artificial photosynthesis, repeatedly failing. Here is the moral dilemma that tears at the soul: how to maintain humanity when everything conspires to turn you into a monster. A doctor would have to choose between saving his daughter or 5 unknown children. A pastor would have to lie about divine visions to keep his congregation hopeful. Could you keep your faith if you saw people being eaten by others in dark alleys? Meet Anna, a 30-year-old mother hiding in a basement with her 8-month-old baby. She breastfeeds the child, even though she has no milk. Her malnourished body only produces blood. Each feed is a silent cry of love in the midst of pain. Or Carlos, a former atheist who now carries a crucifix made of electrical wires, promising everyone that God has guided him to a forgotten candle warehouse. And Khadija, a 12-year-old girl who writes letters to the sun in a frozen diary. Please come back. I promise not to complain about the heat ever again. And you? Would you be like Anna, fighting until your last breath for love? Like Carlos, turning despair into unshakable faith? Or like the looters, who trade morale for one more day of life? Comment now with one word: love. If you believe that you would make noble choices right to the end. Survival, if you admit that you would do whatever it takes to live. Each answer is a portrait of the human soul, and I want to keep yours in this archive of resistance. After 6 months of perpetual darkness, the Earth would no longer be recognizable. The average temperature would reach -200 degrees Celsius, colder than the surface of Pluto. Once blue oceans would turn into deserts of black ice, with waves frozen on 20-meter-high peaks, like monuments to the movement they once had. Whole forests shattered by the cold would look like fields of shattered glass. Even the microbes deep in the ground, which have survived 5 mass extinctions, would be extinct. Life in all its forms would be reduced to a footnote in cosmic history. But the real terror would be in the details that science barely dares to explore. The air would liquefy. Yes, you read that right. At temperatures below -190 degrees Celsius, oxygen and nitrogen would condense into bluish rivers running along the ground, a macabre spectacle of lakes of liquid air where once there were squares and parks. Breathing would be impossible without pressurized suits, and even the deepest bunkers heated by geothermal cores would face deadly leaks. In shelters in Iceland, the last 10,000 human survivors would struggle not against the cold, but against despair. 2/3 would have already committed suicide, preferring control of their own death to the torture of a corpse planet. In a secret bunker under Mount Erebus in Antarctica, a group of fanatical scientists would attempt the impossible: to steal energy from other planets. Using adapted telescopes, they would take aim at Jupiter, whose aurora borealis shines with the force of 2 million nuclear power plants. The idea? To capture particles from its magnetic storms using abandoned satellites. The project, called Prometheus 2.0, would fail in 72 hours, not because of human error, but because Jupiter is 780 million kilometers away. One of the engineers, driven mad, would scream before throwing himself into a pit of liquid air. Other survivors would resort to marginal theories. They would dig down into the Earth's mantle in search of volcanic heat, triggering earthquakes that would crack continents, or they would try to reactivate buried nuclear power plants, creating radiation zones where the cold would be exchanged for a slower death. In an extreme case, a sect in Kazakhstan would use 300 kilos of uranium to build a miniature artificial sun, which would explode, sterilizing a radius of 500 kilometers and burying hope under radioactive ashes. Connecting to other cosmic catastrophes. This scenario is not unique. The death of the sun echoes other possible horrors. A wandering black hole swallowing the solar system in 24 hours. An invasion of gamma rays from a nearby supernova, frying the atmosphere in 15 seconds. The collapse of the Earth's magnetic field, leaving us exposed to killer solar winds. But there is a crucial difference. All these catastrophes would come to a quick end. Death by solar darkness would be slow and agonizing. Amidst the ice, however, one question would persist. What if there is life beyond Earth? Probes sent in haste to Europa, Jupiter's moon, would find underground oceans. but no answers. Radio signals sent to Alpha Centauri would take 4 years to arrive and another 4 to return. In the meantime, humanity would be history, an astrobiologist on an abandoned orbital station. With 2 days of oxygen left, she would record a final message. We have found microbes on Mars, but they are dead, just as we soon will be. The universe is an immense graveyard of possibilities. Why were we endowed with consciousness, only to witness the end itself? What about you? Would you believe that life on other planets represents a new beginning for humanity? Or would you accept that we are the result of cosmic chance, destined to disappear without a trace into infinity? Comment now with hope if you believe that life has meaning even in the face of the unknown. Resist if you decide to fight until the last moment for a chance to survive. Your every word is an echo against the silence of the cosmos, and I will treasure them like memories that stand the test of time. Throughout this video, you have witnessed the minute-by-minute collapse of a planet without a sun, from the first 8 minutes of cosmic ignorance to the liquefaction of the air at -200 degrees Celsius. He saw societies crumbling, human nature exposed in its rawest form, and the struggle for survival in unimaginable conditions. We learned that without the star that warms us, the Earth would turn into a frozen corpse in a matter of weeks, and that even the most resistant microbes would succumb in 6 months. This video was a mirror. It showed that our technology and pride are fragile in the face of cosmic forces. The reflection that remains is harsh, but necessary. We are fragile. Every breath of air, every grain of food, every second of light depends on a balance that we do not control. How many of us live as if we were immune to the laws of the universe? This hypothetical exercise isn't just about the end of the sun. It's about waking up to the reality that we're made of the same stardust that forms the stars, but just as vulnerable as they are. I'm absolutely sure this video has impacted you. Here's your chance to take action. Leave your like now. Comment hope if you believe in human resilience, even in extreme cold, or humanity. Now that this video has made you think about our collective strength, subscribe to the channel and activate the bell, because the next video will blow your mind even more. But beware, the next video will only reach you if YouTube understands that we are a community that thinks, feels, and seeks answers together. Every like, every subscription, every comment from you is a vote for this content to reach more curious minds. And remember, as long as you're breathing, the sun is still shining. But every second is a reminder that our time here is precious. Don't let the darkness win. Your action now keeps this flame burning. See you in the next video.